Something's really weird about American Christianity. If you go to the old historic Protestant church in any given town, there's like no one there, and if there are people there, they're probably theologically liberal, which means they don't care about the core doctrines of Christianity. This isn't the same as politically liberal, by the way. But it's not like there's no Christians in America, there's tons of them, but they're kind of like a rogue mass of people whose churches don't look like anything of what we would think of as a church. So what happened? Well, these old historic churches are probably part of mainline denominations, like Episcopal, United Methodist, or Presbyterian Church USA, and these mainline denominations have gotten really theologically liberal, partly because there are conservative denominations that split off and ran away from these, like the Presbyterian Church in America, or the Anglican Church in North America. So the historic established ones, the original ones, have gotten all liberal, and the conservative ones broke off and ran away. But notice it's always the liberals that keep the original denominations and the conservatives that have to run away and start something new, which only accelerates the trend of the mainstream Christian institutions towards liberalism. The split was honestly a surrender on the part of the conservative Bible-believing Christians. Let's say the church is the kingdom of God, and the mainline church is the capital city of that kingdom. It was really strong and powerful, and the outside forces, like the left and secularism, were not able to penetrate it from the outside. The church was in charge of society, but they were able to penetrate it from the inside by hijacking it, and when that happened, the conservatives didn't fight for their city, they just fled out into the countryside and tried to form a new city. But that city was never nearly as strong as the old one. Because when the conservatives left the mainline denominations, they left behind a lot of really important things. Because whether we like it or not, the mainline churches are the well-established ones. They're relics from a time when Christianity ruled society, and it doesn't anymore, so we can't just rebuild something like this. There have been generations and generations of important families donating their resources to these mainline churches and their schools. So they have way more resources. It's not just pretty buildings, it's all these cultural connections. They have all the established seminaries, and they do a lot of service to the community. So they have a lot of strong community connections that could have a strong influence on the community if they were in the hands of Christians. So like I said, modern evangelicals will never be able to build anything as great because it's a different time now. So all we can do is retake the old stuff. So the mainline church is definitely worth retaking. But is this biblical? Yes. In the Bible, many times people went astray and worshipped false gods in the temple. But God never told the prophets to split off and form their own new temples. God told them to retake the temple no matter how far gone the temple was. Because in the Bible, physical, geographic locations seem to matter a lot more than they do to modern evangelicals. Think of it this way. A thing's essence is what it is, and a thing's accident is the condition that it's in. So by its essence, the mainline church is a lot stronger than the evangelical church, it's just sick, so in reality, in practice, it's a lot weaker, and does a lot less for the kingdom. But it could do a lot more for the kingdom if it was not infected by this theological liberalism. So right now, the evangelical church obviously is doing way more for God's kingdom than the mainline church, but the mainline church could do so much more if it just wasn't sick. So I'm proposing Operation Reconquista, named after the Reconquista of Spain and Portugal in the Middle Ages, where we retake the mainline churches. Now, there's nothing violent or hostile about this, the military language is just for inspiration. So we sort of unhijack them, because if the progressives could hijack them one way, we could re-hijack it the other way to get them to actually practice and preach what they believe on paper. So we start by getting people more involved in these mainline churches, getting them to move in gradually, and then we have faithful Bible-believing Christians take leadership in them, and we disrupt these progressive habitats and make it so that it's not a safe space for progressivism to fester anymore. And I'm going to go more into detail of exactly how to do this later, this is just a brief overview. And like I said, this is not hostile, we're trying to help these mainline denominations because they're dying out. The congregations in mainline denominations keep shrinking and many of them are disappearing. The only ones that are immune to this are the ones that are theologically conservative, meaning they actually believe in Christianity. So if we're making more of their congregations conservative, we're actually helping them, and we're making them not die out. So this is an act of love and service to them. And keep in mind, they're not all bad. Even the liberal ones are not all bad, because if it weren't for them, then the church buildings would have been converted into bars like they are in Europe. So the first step is to have pioneers scout out these mainline churches to see which ones would be good for starting new communities. Then the pioneers invite other faithful Bible-believing Christians to join them to actually start forming these sub-communities. The third step is that these sub-communities will actually waken the quiet conservative minorities in these mainline churches. Even though the pastors are mostly liberal, there's a lot of lay people who are conservative, they're just underrepresented. But these communities can awaken them. And these conservative sub-communities will outlast the dying liberal majority because liberal churches always die off. It's what they do. And maybe eventually the mainline churches, when they get more conservative, can reunify with their conservative counterparts. And it won't be as hard as it sounds. I can speak from experience that mainline churches need people no matter what. They give out leadership positions like free candy because they're dying out and they just need someone to do something. It took me 1 year at age 14 to be promoted to like a big Sunday school teacher in my church, and it took my dad 2 years to become an elder in our church after joining. So do you want to get involved? There's basically 3 options for you. You could be a pioneer where you start scouting out mainline churches, and if you find one that you think you're going to want to commit to long term, just contact me somehow. You could be a foot soldier where you actually start going to these groups that are forming in the mainline churches once that there's an online directory that'll make of which ones to go to. Or if you, for whatever reason, can't join a mainline church, maybe you're rooted in your own church and you don't want to leave, that's fine. You could be a messenger. You could tell your pastor about the Reconquista, or maybe just spread knowledge of it by sharing my posts and videos, or just telling people with a large platform about it. Anyway, anything helps at all, really. So let's say you want to get started. So start by attending a local mainline church. There's denominations that are sort of priority, like the PCUSA and the UMC, and preferably one that has low attendance, which is one that you could make more of a mark on. And like I said, slow and steady wins the race. Do not barge in demanding them to change everything and calling them heretics, because you're going to get kicked out. They're not going to like you. Try to still form respectful bonds in the community. Like I said before, try to see the good in them, even if it's kind of hard to do, because these people are still committed to their churches and serving their communities in some way, even if they're not doing it in the right way. We need to see them as mission fields, not as enemies. The only enemies are the demons that are convincing them to go away from Christ. So if you show your passion for Christ, even if they disagree with you, they will appreciate your enthusiasm, because energy is something that's really lacking in these old mainline churches. And you will likely rise up in the ranks. That's what happened at my church. It's kind of how me and a few other guys stopped our church from fully falling to progressivism, even though it was about to. So once you do that, start inviting others. And like I said, it's an act of service, not a hostile takeover. We're trying to redeem these church communities that have existed for centuries. There are some very valid objections people raise, and I'll answer them here. So some people are like, what if I have kids? You shouldn't expose your kids to false teaching, right? Yeah, of course not. If the church is actively preaching false things, you shouldn't bring your kids there. But a lot of the mainline churches aren't explicitly heretical, they're just sort of lukewarm. So those should be fine, because parents matter a lot more than churches in terms of influencing their kids to have good Christian values. Some people say, why not just promote beauty in the conservative denominations? Wouldn't that be a lot more quick and easy? Well, you got to see that the loss of beauty and tradition in breakaway denominations is inevitable. It's not a bug, it's a feature. However, the liberalism in the mainline denominations is really a bug, not a feature, because it's really just they're not believing what they say they believe on paper. It's a corruption of it. It's not what it is in its nature, like I said. And some people say, how can we possibly take back denominations that are so lost? I've said it before and I'll say it again. If they could hijack it one way, we can hijack it back, unless you think we're somehow weaker than them. Some people ask why I go through all this effort just for pretty buildings. Like, isn't sound doctrine more important? Isn't the church a people, not a building? Well, let's say that someone took over your house. Obviously, you care a lot more about your family than your house. But you're not going to want your family to live in some shack outside. You're going to want to take back your house. And it's the same deal for God's house. But like I said, it's not just about the buildings. It's all the cultural connections and resources that are attached to the buildings and the broader denominations. Some people say, if you're doing this, why not go further and retake the Roman Catholic Church? With that logic, we should do that. Was Luther wrong to split off? Well, the Reformation was completely different from the evangelical splits, because Luther and the Reformers didn't lose anything when they split. They took all of the churches and resources with them, and they improved them. The evangelicals just left and left behind a lot of the important stuff, so it's a completely different situation. And some people say, why can't we just buy out the church buildings when the mainline churches die out? I mean, that's a good thing to do, but like I said, the buildings aren't everything. And some people ask if it's worth spending all this time and effort anyway. Well, evangelical churches do a ton of work for mission trips. So think of this as a mission trip, but instead of going to Zimbabwe, you can just go across the street to First Presbyterian Church. You'll save money on the plane ticket. And people ask, will they be spiritually starved in a mainline church? Now, I do think if someone's has a weak faith, they shouldn't do this. But the word and the sacraments are the means of grace, the thing God feeds us with spiritually at church. And as the whole Donatist controversy with St. Augustine revealed, it's the Spirit working through them. Doesn't depend on the faithfulness of the person doing them. So even if the pastor at a mainline church is not a real believer, you could still be spiritually fed through them because it's the Spirit working through these means of grace. And what do we do if people ask what we're doing here? We don't need to lie. We can say that we're trying to revive these historic communities that are obviously not doing too well. So there is a bit of a priority of which denominations specifically we should focus on. The Presbyterian Church USA, the Reformed Church in America, and the United Methodist Church are all in critical points. So I'd say those are the most important. Less important is like the Episcopal Church. It's really hard to change, but it's still important. And the Moravian Church, I don't know. The Christian Reformed Church in North America already has a lot of conservatives. And a low priority is places where there either already is a conservative equivalent that's basically equal in terms of its historical rootedness, or if it's like too far gone, like the United Church of Christ. Okay, that's basically my summary of Operation Reconquista. Please share this with everyone you know that you think would have an impact on this. So please pray for success and for the Lord to be with us as we do this, and may the Lord bless and keep all of you.